They gaslight you, they manipulate you, they promote narratives. And the only one who's not doing that is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
You a fan?
Yeah.
Joe Rogan said on his show, The Joe Rogan Experience, that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the only candidate that makes sense to him. Now, does that mean that he endorsed or is endorsing Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? We'll have to watch the clip here to see if that's the case. But one, Donald J. Trump is not so happy, it appears, about Joe Rogan saying this. John Iadarola and Cenk Uygur on the Young Turks broke all this down. Let's check this out.
Joe Rogan decided, I guess, to just shake up the already fraught situation on the Republican side of this campaign when he said this.
That's just what they do. That's politics. They do it on the left, they do it on the right. They gaslight you, they manipulate you, they promote narratives. And the only one who's not doing that is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
You a fan?
Yeah, I am a fan. Yeah, he's the only one that makes sense to me. He's the only one that he doesn't attack people. He attacks actions and ideas, but he's much more reasonable and intelligent. I mean, the guy was an environmental attorney and cleaned up the East River. I mean, he's a legitimate guy. I thought he was too. I thought he was this nut, this like conspiracy theorist nut, until I read his book.
So that is Joe Rogan saying that RFK Jr. is the only one that makes sense to him. And he goes on in long extended rant. You saw a little bit of it there where he cites the fact that he thinks that he's very reasonable and very intelligent and he cleaned up the East River. And he didn't mention the bear for some reason or the worm or the ladybugs or anything like that. But he mentioned a few things. And if any of that sounds convincing to you, I would just beg if you please watch John Oliver's most recent episode on RFK Jr. But that wasn't all he said. He goes on to say that he predicted that Harris could defeat Trump. He doesn't say that she definitely will, but he says he can really imagine her beating Trump. And when you combine that with the fact that he's now saying RFK Jr. is the only one that makes sense to him, you can imagine that there are some who are going to be angry about that. One in particular, and yes, he apparently was listening, Donald Trump bleated, "It will be interesting to see how loudly Joe Rogan gets booed the next time he enters the UFC ring." I don't know what the question marks are for. It's just a statement. MAGA 2024.
Okay, I'm going to break in here for just a second to say that I don't really think anybody should be surprised that Joe Rogan does not support Donald J. Trump. And we can look at Joe Rogan's own words to clarify that. This is from an article from 2022. This is USA Today, July 6, 2022. Joe Rogan says he declined having Donald Trump on his podcast. "I don't want to help him. I'm not a Trump supporter in any way, shape, or form," Joe Rogan said. "I've had the opportunity to have him on my show, Donald Trump, more than once. I've said no every time. I don't want to help him. I'm not interested in helping him," Rogan said. Rogan also called Trump a polarizing figure and an existential threat to democracy itself. I don't see how you can make it much clearer than that. Joe Rogan does not seem to really be much of a fan of Donald Trump. He says he's not going to have him on his show. So really, to me, it comes as no surprise that he's not saying it's an endorsement, but say that he thinks that RFK Jr. is the best candidate. But let's hear more of what they said on the Young Turks.
And so he's very mad. And so now there's a fight and it's all over Twitter. And you probably didn't see it because you're a reasonable person. Why would you be on Twitter? But anyway, so people are attacking Rogan and people are attacking Trump. And then Rogan apparently noticed that this is not necessarily great for his brand, many of which are Trump supporters. So he put out a statement saying, "For the record, this isn't an endorsement. This is me saying that I like RFK Jr. as a person and I really appreciate the way he discusses things with civility and intelligence. I think we could use more of that in this world." And much of that is accurate to what he originally said. He did also originally say he's the only one that makes sense to me. That is not in the tweet for some reason. But he goes on to say, "I also think Trump raising his fist and saying fight after getting shot, kind of, is one of the most American effing things of all time. Okay, I'm not the guy to get political information from. If you want that from a comic, go to Comic Dave Smith. He actually knows what he's talking about." First of all, this continues the years-long thing where Joe Rogan pretends to not understand that millions of people just believe whatever he says or whatever he brings some insane person on his show to say. It's a complete abdication of the responsibility you have from having a platform, but that's what he does. So it's an interesting backtrack. He doesn't want to anger the MAGA people, and yet he's telling them to listen to a person who doesn't like the MAGA guy. It's interesting, especially coming out of last week when Kyle Rittenhouse was all of a sudden a big, strong boy who wasn't going to support Trump anymore. And then he got attacked on Twitter and he immediately backtracked. And so, I don't know, it's an interesting civil war brewing on the right. What do you think?
Yeah, it also happened to Tim Pool. And they say, oh, no, he was just trolling. And maybe he is, but who knows? With people on the right wing, I know Tim also pretends not to be on the right wing. Okay, they're always like, whenever they get caught in something, I was just kidding. I was just out of context. So, but maybe he was, because there's a lot of people troll. So but I'm not gonna like assess with perfect accuracy whether Tim Pool was joking or he got the same exact situation that happened to Kyle Rittenhouse and Joe Rogan. And so if you say, no, they did not bend to the MAGA crowd, okay, that's your opinion. But you can't say that there wasn't a giant pushback and that they didn't notice it. No, they definitely noticed it, and they were definitely concerned about it. All three of those folks, right? Whether Tim Pool was joking or not, Rogan clearly not joking. So let's talk about Rogan. Look, he's an interesting and oftentimes frustrating guy, and both with him and Dave Smith, there are things that I agree and disagree with. Easy agreement with the beginning of his statement: Democrats and Republicans are full of crap. They have these narratives and talking points and fake. Totally true. Okay, so but at the end of the day, we have to choose somebody. And if you say, hey, I'm going to choose RFK Jr., I interviewed RFK Jr. here. We had a really good conversation, substantive one. I asked him about policy. Nobody ever asked him about policy. I did, Rogan did, to be fair. I like RFK Jr.'s housing policy a lot. He has the best housing policy and the best anti-corruption policy. Does that mean I'm voting for him? No, there's a couple of other things that are deal breakers for me. But I wouldn't hate on Rogan or Dave Smith or any of them if they said, I'm going to RFK Jr., right? I'd get it, and it would actually be on brand for them in a lot of ways. And by on brand, I don't mean like, oh, they're trying to do a brand. Just, no, it matches their ideology a little bit better than Trump does and Kamala Harris does, right? But you could tell there was blowback and Rogan was worried about it. Not because Rogan has the advantage of being rich. So he doesn't have to worry about, oh, what do the advertisers think? What does the media company think, et cetera. But there's a concept called audience capture.
Yep.
And that's what they're all scared to death of. And by the way, that is also true of the left wing. Go an inch off of left wing so-called Twitter ideology. I don't know who came up with it, and they'll rip your head off. Have I lived through that? Only a million times, right? But we have the courage to stand by our convictions. So the reason you could tell even with Rogan is that second paragraph where he's like, oh, but don't get me wrong, Trump was a super badass when he got shot and he raised his fist. Yeah, I agree with that actually, and I said that as well, but why are you bringing it up now? It makes it sound like, oh, yeah, I mean RFK Jr. is the only one I agree with, but I don't want to endorse him because I'm you guys, Trump's a badass. Don't forget, Trump's a badass. You don't have to do that, okay? And he did do that because, yeah, this is what I've been saying about Tim Pool and Joe Rogan. Whether you think you're a right winger or not, almost your entire audience is right wingers. And you keep thinking that there's tons of moderates in there and a whole bunch of left wingers in there. There's almost no left wingers. And if you're being honest with yourself, very few moderates, okay? It's giant right-wing audiences that are like screaming at them, how dare you, Trump, right? No, okay, Trump. And guys, then somebody's like, oh yeah, like you're any better. We lost a decent chunk of our audience, let alone the left-wing fights that we've had. But because we didn't back Biden, we said we were honest. They said too old, sorry, too old. And you're never gonna get me to lie and say he's not too old. And so, but audience capture is a hell of a drug and very, very tempting. I like Dave Smith a lot, by the way.
So if what Cenk Uygur said is correct, that Joe Rogan has an audience full of Trump supporters and MAGA right-wing people, I think that's interesting because, like I pointed out in this article from USA Today, and that was from 2 years ago, Joe Rogan has, makes it pretty clear that he doesn't like Donald Trump and he will not have him on his show and he won't support him. So I think I wonder if he lost any, he still has a massive show, but I wonder if Joe Rogan lost any viewers and listeners when he came out and said that. I also think, this is what's interesting about politics right now. So Joe Rogan comes out and says he likes Robert F. Kennedy the best. we have almost no mechanism in this country for a third party candidate to get anywhere, no matter what you think of RFK Jr. And we have so many people in our country that their team R, and anybody that's on the other side is evil and wrong about everything, or the people are team D and everybody on the side opposite of them is wrong and evil and everything. We have this weird team mentality from people rather than actually looking at the policies. And what Cenk Uygur is pointing out here, there's some nuance there with Joe Rogan that he supports RFK Jr., even though he doesn't think that he's perfect, that there are some flaws with him, but he's the guy that gets closer to what he wants to see a president do. And I don't know why more people don't look at things that way in terms of our political systems and our voting in this country. But what do you think? Is Joe Rogan correct to come out and endorse RFK Jr.? Do you think he'll lose any listeners or viewers over this? I mean, obviously Donald Trump is not happy about it. Do you agree with any of the stuff that Cenk Uygur said here about Joe Rogan? He seems to think, that he's an interesting character and there's a lot of nuance there. Let me know what you think about this. Comment on the video. Tell me what you think about Cenk Uygur, John Iadarola, RFK Jr., Joe Rogan, any of these figures. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. That helps me to grow the channel and to continue to do more content like this. I'll see you in the next one.